Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you how to cut this simple but beautiful corset top that you can style in different ways. So if this sounds like what you would like to learn, then definitely keep watching. So this is my pattern paper. I've gone ahead to draw out my starting line, which is also going to be my shoulder line. So from that top part, I'm going to mark my shoulder to my bust line, my shoulder to my under bust, my shoulder to my waistline, and then my shoulder to my hip line. So go ahead and take your own measurement, and whatever you have, that's what you're going to be marking. So after doing that, I'm just going ahead to connect my markings, and then I'll label this as my bust line, my under bust, my waistline, and then my hip line. So the next thing I'm going ahead to do is to mark my shoulder measurements divided by 2, and for my neck width I'm going to be marking 3 inches. For now I'm not going to be marking any neckline, so I'll go ahead and mark my shoulder slant, which is 1 inch, and after doing that I'll go ahead and connect it to the neck width. So the next thing I'm going to do is to mark my armhole measurements divided by 2, which is my bust circumference divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches. So after doing that, I'm going to connect my lines, and I will label this as my chest line. So the next thing I'm going ahead to do is to mark my armhole curve. So I marked my bust circumference divided by 4, then the middle point of my armhole. So at that point I came in by ½ an inch, and after that I went ahead to connect my points. If you already know how to draft a basic body, then go ahead and do just that. So starting from the bust line, I'm going to mark the nipple to nipple measurement divided by 2. Mine is 8 inches, so divided by 2 will give me 4 inches. So I'm just going ahead to mark my 4 inches all the way down to the hemline, and after that I'll connect my points. So for my dart intake, I'm working with a bust of 40 inches. So I'm going to be taking 0.75 on this side, then 1.25 on this other side. Now if you're working with a bust below 40 inches, 1 inch on both sides will also come out perfect. So after marking that, I went ahead to connect my points. So from the bust point, I'm going to come down by ½ an inch, then I'll connect from the under bust to the ½ an inch using my curve rule. So the next thing we are going ahead to do is to divide our shoulder into 2, and from that point we are going to connect to the bust point. So guys, the next thing we are going to do is to mark the front neckline, and to do that I'm going to come up from the chest line by 1.5 inches, and that should be enough to cover around the bust area. So at that point I'm going to come towards the center front by 0.75, and then towards the armhole I'm going to mark 1 inch. And after that, I'll go ahead to connect it to ½ an inch before the bust point. Try not to get to the bust point so that your bustier can come out perfectly. And if you have any sharp edge, try to smoothen that out. And also ensure that your 2 dart lines are equal on both sides, so that by the time you will be joining the 2 pieces together, one side will not be longer than one side. So from the bust line, I'm going to go up by ½ an inch, and then I will come in by ½ an inch. So from the ½ an inch I just marked, I'm going to connect it to the bust line just like this. So using my curve rule, I'll connect from that point to the under bust, just as you can see me do. And just in case you do not understand what I'm saying, just look at what I did. It's very simple. And I'll also connect from this dart line to this point. So the next thing I'm going to do is to connect this dart line to the shoulder point. But before I do that, I'm going to first of all come inward by ½ an inch. But you can make it 1 inch if you want your armhole to be smaller. So I'm going to connect from the shoulder line to the ½ an inch, and that is it for the front neckline and the shoulder line. So the next thing I'm going to do is to mark 4.5 inches from the nipple point, and that is my nipple to nipple measurement divided by 2 plus ½ an inch. So what you will be marking here is your nipple to nipple measurement divided by 2 plus ½ an inch. So I'm going to mark 4.5 inches here, and then from this 4.5 inches I will connect to the under bust, then to the armhole curve. So guys, the next thing we are going to do is to replace our dart intake. So I'm going to measure what I have here, which is 1.75. I'm going to replace it on the chest line. So from the bust measurement, I'm going to replace my 1.75. Then I'll add 1 inch for my sewing allowance. Then on the waistline, I'm going to be marking my waist circumference divided by 4 plus my dart intake and then my sewing allowance. And on the hip line, I'll go ahead and do the same thing. I will mark my hip circumference, add my dart intake and also my sewing allowance. And when I've done that, I'll go ahead and connect my basic bodies. So the next thing I'm going ahead to do is to mark 2 inches from my side seam. But if you want to have a basque waistline, you can go up by 3 to 4 inches and then connect it to the center front. But I want to have a normal hemline, so I will connect to this dart line. And after that, I'm just going ahead to cut out my pattern. And that is it, guys. If you know you are worth to this extent and this video is very useful to you, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up because it helps the channel to grow. Put on your post notification bell, subscribe if you haven't done that, so that whenever there's a new video up on the channel, you will be notified. So the next thing I'm going ahead to do is to draw out my outline for my wording. But if you're not going to be using any wording, then you do not need this outline. So after doing that, I went ahead to cut out the rest of my pattern, and this is what I have. So I'm just going to set this aside and cut out my back piece. So for my back piece, I've gone ahead to draw out my basic lines. I practically repeated everything I did for the front piece. I've marked my shoulder to my chest line, which is my armhole measurement divided by 2, my shoulder to my bust line, my shoulder to my waist, and then my shoulder to my hip line. So the next thing I'm going to do is to mark the nipple to nipple measurement divided by 2, and this time I'm starting from the chest line. So I will go ahead and connect from the chest line down to the hip line, and then I will connect my points. So on the waistline, I'm going to mark 1/2 inch on both sides, and I will do the same on the hip line. And after doing that, I'll go ahead and connect my dart lines. And when I was doing that, my marker actually slipped. That's why you're seeing multiple lines on my dart. So the next thing I'm going ahead to do is to divide my shoulder into 2, just like I did for the front piece, because your shoulder at the front and at the back should match together. So after marking my middle point, I came down from the center back by 4.5 inches because I want to have a round neck. You can determine any kind of neckline that you want. And after doing that, I went ahead to connect my points. Now on the chest line, I'm going to mark the bust circumference divided by 4 plus my sewing allowance. And on the waistline, I'm going to mark the waist circumference divided by 4. I'll replace my dart intake and then I will add 1 inch for my sewing allowance. And on the hip line, I'm going to mark the hip circumference divided by 4 plus my dart intake and then my sewing allowance. And when I'm done with that, I'll go ahead and connect my points. So just like I did for the front piece, I'm going to come up by 2 inches. And on the center back, I'm going to come up by 1 inch because I want my center back to be a little bit shorter. So after marking that, I'll connect my point, and that is it for the back piece. So looking at this pattern, you will see that I haven't added any zipper allowance to it, but I'm going to be doing that by the time I'm cutting it out on my fabric. So you can decide if you want to have an eyelet or if you want to have a zipper. That is entirely up to you. So I'll go ahead and cut out my pattern, and that is it for the back piece. And so guys, if you know this video was useful, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the YouTube channel, put on your post notification bell so that whenever I upload a new video up on the channel, you will be notified. So until I see you in my next video, stay blessed.